My new friend and I have been doing Money Mondays together. We're going through the same book, but what I didn't expect was to be sitting across from a mirror and watch my old money wounds play out in real time. We've been meeting at one of my favorite coffee shops. They typically order a matcha, I typically get a black coffee. And even though it's only been 2 meetups thus far, it's not going exactly the way I had planned. I thought that we would be going chapter by chapter, but we haven't even got past the introduction. What I'm starting to realize is that we're not actually here to read a book, but that actually we're watching and witnessing as a mirror to each other. I'm noticing that the things that she's saying is stuff that I used to say before I began my money journey, sharing feelings that I used to feel and having all the questions that I used to ask. And sure, I can feel a little frustrated because I really had the intent of wanting to go through the book together, but I'm actually feeling something else. I'm feeling compassion for her and where her current mindset is at around money, but I'm also feeling proud for both of us, for her for wanting to have these conversations honestly, openly, and transparently, but also proud of me as the physical proof that I've changed. Because literally every time she says something, my mind has a different perspective, has a different answer, has a different reason. For example, when I say we haven't even gone past the introduction, I'll show you what I mean. This is literally the last 2 sentences of the introduction. It says, "At the end of the day, my goal for you is to help make money easy in your own life so you can feel free and abundant because that is your birthright." Stop right there. That's literally what we've been talking about for the past 2 times we've hung out. Is it our birthright to feel free and abundant? So the way that I'm navigating this with her is the same way that I navigate it with all of you. I look at the etymology of things. I start looking up words and definitions. Somehow she's come across that when she hears birthright, it's synonymous to entitlement. And so we're going through the definitions and asking ourselves, what do we really mean by that? But just even in that process is the proof of the change that's happened. I say this because I do believe that it is a birthright to be rich. But it depends on how you define rich. For instance, a guy who's really popular in the financial world, his name is Ramit Sethi, and he wrote the book, I Will Teach You How to Be Rich. And one question he often asks, how do you define your rich life? But for her, it's a struggle. She's like, I don't believe that it's my birthright or that I'm entitled to be rich, that I'm entitled to have money, that I'm entitled, and keeps using this word over and over again. I was like, we need to look at the etymology of this. And so that's the process that we've been going through. Again, not even going past the introduction. We are unraveling and asking ourselves, what is our birthright as human beings? And depending on where you're at on the spectrum, you can be where my new friend is at, where they're like, absolutely not. I have to work hard for my things. I don't deserve this. I'm not enough for this. And for me, I'm at the point where just being is already enough. And that my pursuit of wanting to be rich and wealthy is going to be based off of my own definition, but that it's a worthy pursuit and that I have a right to honor my desire to want to experience that. But you see, it wasn't always like this. I think about my money story and who I bought it from, my mom, my dad. They both had different stories for themselves. And even though we never had the conversation around what money is, what it does, what it's called, what we do with it, I just watched from afar. On one hand, I had my mom who is generous and a giver and knows how to make money and knows how to give money and has a very lucid, flowing relationship with money. It comes and it goes, it comes and it goes. It regenerates or recirculates, it regenerates or recirculates. But yet, it seemed like she never had enough. And it's because people were always asking, and she didn't have boundaries on how to say no. As her child, and witnessing and listening to all of her grievances, it's taken me a long time to realize, a very long time to realize. That is a lesson that she has to learn on her own. Her practice of saying no, her practice of people pleasing, her practice of setting boundaries, which it pains me to see, and is also the reason why, for a long time, why I didn't pursue money, because I didn't want to be next in line. If you are Filipino, you know the story. You know the typical immigrant, migrant story. You leave so you can send money back home. That being the role of my mother, it's been difficult to watch as her child. Now, my dad, on the other hand, he was the saver. And so much so that I got to the point where my mom gave my dad her money and he would kind of act as the internal bank to get access to her money because she wasn't very intentional about it and would just give it away. anytime someone would ask. My dad, on the other hand, had better boundaries and was good about saying no. But when it came to me and how money passed through me, gratefully, there was always more than enough. Something that my dad used to say was, here's some pocket money. Always have some pocket money on you. And so ever since I was a kid, especially when I started going out in the streets and buying from the ice cream man and going to the corner liquor store, I always had pocket money on me. Now, even saying that out loud, do I think that pocket money is always enough? No, pocket money is $20, $40. I mean, when I was younger, it was $5, it was $10. And so maybe having to increase or even use different words than pocket money. Nonetheless, I didn't start feeling the constraints of money, or at least my feelings of constraints with money, until I moved to downtown San Diego. It was right before the pandemic and my 30th birthday that me and my best friend said that we were going to make the leap and move to one of the most desirable cities in the States, and that we were going to just crash in a studio because we were going to be outside anyways, as it's a place that's known for always being 75 and sunny. And then March 2020 hits. And just like everybody else, we're asking questions of what the future is going to look like. And one of the questions for me was, what will work look like? I could only work in customer service for so long. Thankfully, at the time, I was considered an essential worker. But if that wasn't the case, what would I have done? And so this started my rabbit hole journey of trying to figure out another path so that I don't feel or experience the whiplash of changes in the job market. And so this is when I started buying courses. And I would say prior to 2020, the way that I managed my money was pretty well. I had $10,000 in an investment. My credit score was above 700. I paid all my bills on time. I was a great renter, even to the point where I was the on-site manager for the building that I was living in. And even though I wasn't making a lot of money, I would say I was doing pretty decent for someone who wasn't taught anything about money. No conversation, no course, no financial literacy. I just did what felt intuitive to me. But like I said, 2020 is when I asked myself, what do I got to do differently so I'm not in this situation again in the future? And as most of us were online, so was I. And my algorithm was pushing a whole bunch of courses onto me. And as a forever student and past pursuit of being a teacher, that's where it got me. And so I bought course after course from these online gurus and experts and began this unconscious, deep process of deconditioning my mind. And unfortunately, at the time, I didn't know that I might potentially have a neurodivergent brain. So the novelty of new courses just kind of kept me on the loop for a very long time. So 2022 happens and life goes back to normal as usual. And at this point, I somehow stumbled across the opportunity of working for a church. And after having so many different kinds of jobs, working in so many different spaces and places, I remember telling myself that this was going to be probably one of my last stops when it comes to having an employer. And I remember telling myself, if it doesn't work here, then I'm going to go out on my own. But I was banking on the idea that it was going to work out here. Why wouldn't it work out at a church? Why wouldn't it work out in a spiritual place? Why wouldn't it work out in nonprofit? How naive I was at the time. I really did think I was going to stay there for the long haul and that I would never have to actually go out on my own and pursue entrepreneurship because this opportunity would provide all the things that felt like enough to me at the time. Well, that's not the case when you're living in downtown San Diego. Unfortunately, we had to depart ways. But during my time at the church, that was 2 years of spiritual development. Whether it was relationships, whether it was with God, whether it was with work, and of course with money. That there is one verse that stuck with me during that time and has later become an anchor in my life, which I'll share with you a little later on. And so 2 years later, I realized that it was time for us to depart ways. And ironically, my last day of being traditionally employed was on International Workers' Day. Now, I didn't know what the future would hold because I literally did not have a backup plan. I didn't apply for other jobs because I said that I was going to go out on my own. But I just remember the feeling, and what really was the straw that broke the camel's back for me was just the effort, the energy, and the time that I put into that place. It was really when I started having the honest questions with myself about what I deserve. That decision was the start of me saying, oh yeah, prove it. If you truly believe that you can go out and do better, then prove it. And so I have been attempting and practicing to prove it to myself since then. But for me, I wouldn't have had the confidence if I didn't build enough of a relationship with God. If there's one thing that I learned at the church was this idea of provision beyond a W-2, beyond an employer, beyond the government. And I remember having a conversation with God and saying, if I'm really about to go out on my own, I want my life to be a testimony of proof of your provision. But I realized that I wouldn't get to experience that proof unless I made the leap. And so I'm going to tell you this right now. I'm still 2 years later, free falling, arms flailing, legs kicking and screaming, but I've been provided for all the while. And so when I first left, thankfully it was set up in a way. I had just enough in my bank account to cover till the end of my lease in September. And generously, my best friend was at a time and place in their life that they were willing to have company by allowing me to crash at their place until I figured out my next move. And that's when I started tackling my money from a spiritual standpoint. Because in the beginning, all kinds of guilt and shame came up around asking for help, asking for support. And I experienced the cultural weight of feeling like a failure, especially to my Filipino parents. And just having the moments of doubt of what's going to be next. How do you start a business? What does it mean to be an entrepreneur? What does that require? And can I even do it? But because I never thought I'd actually be in a position where I'd be crashing on my friend's couch, that's when I began asking questions and seeking answers. And so I knew that my mindset around money needed to change, that I needed to decondition myself based off what I saw with my mom and what I saw with my dad and the conversations that were never had. And I needed to start tending to that side of the garden in my mind by being intentional about the rewiring and replacing of old programming with new beliefs around money. I'm going to share with you the books that I read that reminded me of what I truly deserve and what my birthright is as a human being on this planet. So as you know, I'm currently working through Make Money Easy by Lewis Howes. And I will say this, I haven't gotten through the book. The whole point of me meeting my friend is to get through this book. But I will say that I wish I would have started with a book like this, starting with our money stories, starting with our money styles, and going to the very beginning of our relationship with money. So if you are on the hunt for a book of where to get started, do so deliberately, intentionally, and with discernment. Again, I fully recognize that this is written by a straight white guy. And I also want to preface and disclaimer, a lot of these books were written by a similar kind of person. But as you all know me, I'm not discriminatory against the messenger. I'm here to find what works. And let's be honest, I think straight white guys have an idea of how money works based off of the society that they've created called capitalism. But don't worry, towards the end, I'm going to give you all some other authors that you could begin your journey with who are folks of color and also women. But again, recognize, when did folks of color and women get access to money in this capitalistic society? So check yourself before you start closing yourself off to the words and the message that could be helpful for you and your financial journey. Let's continue. Think and Grow Rich. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The Game of Life and How to Play It. The Science of Getting Rich. The Richest Man in Babylon. The Greatest Salesman in the World. The Law of Divine Compensation. Love Money, Money Loves You. The Go-Giver. A Happy Pocket Full of Money. And so on. So again, I want to note that those are not only written by white guys, but neurotypical white guys. So I want to give you some options from folks of color and from women that I'm in the process of reading and learning from. So one is Get Money by Kristen Wong. The Budgetista, the person I mentioned earlier, Ramit Sethi. The Financial Feminist by Tori Dunlap. Rich as Fuck by Vivian. We Should All Be Millionaires by Rachel Rogers, which if you are a woman, specifically a woman of color, she gives a great breakdown as to the history of money with women and is currently one of the other books that I'm reading right now alongside Make Money Easy. So again, straight white guy, woman of color, just investigating, researching, and finding what's going to work for me. And I encourage that to be the same for you too. So I gave you some options throughout the spectrum. Choose what's best for you. But more importantly, if you haven't started tackling your money mindset, recognize that at this point in time, it's unavoidable and it's a part of most of our lives. So just get started now. And a good place to start is by asking this one question, which is the one question that was a reoccurring theme out of these books. And the question is, what do I actually believe I deserve? And that's the question that I had to ask for myself when I left my job. What do you believe you actually deserve? Because again, my new friend, she currently believes that it's not her birthright to be rich. And not just rich, but exactly what the book says. Your birthright to feel free and abundant, to live a worthy and joyful life, and to never let money rob you of your peace. Do you believe that for yourself? Do you believe that it's your birthright to live a worthy and joyful life and to never let money rob you of your peace? So, as promised, I want to share with you all the verse that has kept me anchored in these past 2 years that I've been traditionally unemployed by an employer, the state, or the government. Sorry, I just saw a bee come up and I smiled because ironically, we are about to read about bees in that Bible verse that has been carrying me through this journey thus far. And so again, despite how it went down at the church, it wasn't the church, it wasn't the people in it wasn't the nonprofit. It was just the perfect situation for me to ask the question for myself. What is it that I truly deserve? What is my birthright? Not necessarily as a person playing in the game of capitalism and society, but what is my birthright as a child of God? What is my birthright as a child of source, of infinite intelligence, of the universe? And so this is what the Bible says, Matthew 6:25. Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap, nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? And why are you anxious about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is alive and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you? You of little faith. Therefore do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the Gentiles seek after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need all of them. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all things will be added to you. Therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. So the part that really gets to me, and that has been my anchor through all this, is again asking, are you not of more value than they? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? And so just asking myself, if I'm anxious about money, if I'm worried about money, if I'm concerned about money, spending that time feeling all of those feelings doesn't add any time to my life. If anything, it takes away from it. And again, looking out into nature, looking at the birds and the bees and the flowers and the lilies and the grass, how they're continuously provided for. And specifically here in Montreal, the squirrels and the raccoons, how they're continuously provided for. And I know you can say, well, they're not participating in capitalism. I hear you. I agree with you. But I am, and yet I've been provided for. And look, I want to sit here and let you know that I am not perfect in my money mindset and that it is still a practice to believe these things. But I can sit here as my life as living proof that not only have I changed my mindset around what I deserve and what's my birthright as a human being and a child of the ultimate creator, but proof that I have been provided for in one way or another from expected and unexpected places. But I think a bigger question to ask that I wish would have been asked of me earlier on in my money mindset process was the question, what is actually enough for you? I'll tell you this, that when I did that activity for myself, I was surprised. I was surprised by the number, that my enough is actually not that far-fetched, and that no, it wasn't a gajillion dollars, that it was an attainable number. Mind you, my enoughness at the time was when I was single. And so I have to do that activity again and ask myself, what is my new enoughness right now, being in a marriage and having a family? Not only asking, what is your enough? But more importantly, do you feel that you deserve that? And do you feel enough for your enough? And that's the ultimate question. What is your enough? Not the world's enough, not your parents' enough, not your partner's enough, not your kids' enough, not Instagram's enough. What is your enough? And do you feel enough for it? And I want you to know that you are allowed to define this differently than everyone else around you. You are allowed to change what you believe about money. You are allowed to be further along than where you were and not yet where you're going. You're allowed to want more. You're allowed to believe that you deserve more, and you deserve to know that you are enough for your enough. So again, when I'm with my new friend, I'm sitting across from them, with compassion and care, of just being present and a witness to their process of building a new relationship with money, starting with their mindset. As someone who has taken the time to get a refund on old beliefs and started deliberately choosing to buy into new ones. So the mindset is just the start, but it's the best start that you can make because this operates all of this. And remember, thoughts become words, words become actions, actions become habits, habits become routines, routines become your character. So my suggestion, start here and ask yourself the question, what is my enough? And do I believe that I deserve that enough? So with that said, again, I'm not sitting here as a money expert or a guru. This is something that I'm learning in real time with you. So if you want to watch it unfold, consider subscribing. And who knows, maybe Money Mondays will become a series or something that we can do together. And if that's something that you're interested in, drop Money Mondays in the comments and let's see what we can create together. Maybe that can look like going through books or finding actual experts and gurus in this industry who are women and folks of color. And for me, not necessarily neurotypical. But nonetheless, I hope this video gave you some clues as to where you can start on your money mindset and that it supports you in your journey of becoming who you truly are and not what the world told us to be. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye now.